Hello. Today we have someone coming to us from Gold River, California, not too far from Louise. So,
Yeah.
welcome, Kim. Happy to have you. And you just told us before we got on, you found us because of our NPR 1A segment last September. So, that's always great to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was I listen to NPR off and on when I'm traveling, and I was as an adopted person when I heard that they were gonna have both of you on, I was like, "Oh, I gotta listen to this one, obviously." And it was really cool, and I appreciate, reaching out to you and you having me on your podcast. I really appreciate that.
Well, we're
Well,
happy to have you. Yeah.
yeah. And so we want to hear your story. You're adopted, obviously. Tell us how you would like to tell us from the beginning, or if there's a place you want to start with, you just tell a natural story.
I usually just start at the beginning. It seems kind of easier if that's
Yep.
all right.
That's
Yep.
great.
Yeah. So I've been first it was interesting just listening to previous podcasts was that I found it interesting that so many other adoptees have stories that are similar. I mean, there's some parts that are, everybody has like their own variation, but um, I found it almost like a nice little comfort, kind of like a cozy little blanket to listen. I'm like, oh yeah, I get that, I get that, So, I really enjoyed that, and I hope that as I tell my story, maybe there's something that clicks with somebody who's listening for that as well. So I think that's really kind of cool. And so my adoption is closed. I was adopted in 67 out of LA County. And so I don't really know a lot. My parents tell me as much as they know. And I typically call like my mom and dad or my parents. And then my birth parents, I usually call my biologics. So I don't know politically correct wise how that goes, but that's just kind of like what I've always kind of done. And so I'm one of those who has known for forever that they're adopted. I can't even, I don't know when I those words finally clicked, but I knew that I'd heard them for always, and it was just kind of like part of who I was growing up. And I know that like my parents would always tell me on my gotcha day, like on this day, so 1 year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years, we would go through the thing. It's like they would talk about how like we woke up, we were super excited, and what the weather was like, and how they got everything put together, and they drove down to the lawyer's office to pick me up, and it was really kind of funny because like they would tell the whole story, and they would say how when I guess they say it was a nurse, but I think it was just a lady. I don't know because it's a lawyer's office. So,
Right.
but a lady brought me out to them, and when she put us together, she was saying that I was like one of the most physically looking like the people that she was putting me with that she'd ever really seen. And it was really kind of crazy because later on, when I would tell people I was adopted, they're like, no way, because I really, really look like my dad, which was really, and so so I didn't have any of that. I've had friends who were adopted who they were adopted into a family of like 5'4", dark-haired, dark-eyed family, and they were
Yeah.
like 5'8", blonde, blue-eyed, and so they were just kind of like, eventually like, this doesn't, as much as I've learned about genetics in high school science, this really seems like a stretch. And so for me, it just always kind of fit. And the
Kim,
thing that
were you the only child that was adopted?
I was, my parents had wanted to have a big family. Like my mom is the oldest of six. My dad is five of seven. So they came from these really big families. They physically couldn't have children of their own. So adoption was, the way that they were looking to go. And from my understanding, what they had told me is at the time when you were going through the adoption process, you kind of worked your way up the system. And then when you hit the top, you could adopt, and then you kind of like got shuffled back to the bottom and you'd work your way back up and that kind
You
of.
mean like if you had So
when I
they adopted a first child, then they'd go back down?
yeah,
Okay.
that was my understanding. So, um, but then the other part too was like we before I was born and a little bit after I was born, they had moved several different times, and apparently every time they would move, even though they were still kind of like in that Los Angeles, Santa Clarita area, any move like outside the county, they would have to re-register with that county, and that would put them back down. So they
Mm.
were kind of going up and down and stuff like that. So they had planned to have more, but I think it just got to the point where every time we would move, they would go and they were just like, "Oh, the heck with it."
Yeah.
um, so I am an only adopted, but I have my mom's younger siblings are just like 8, 10 years above me. So it's kind of like I had, those older siblings. For an only child, I think I'm pretty good at like sharing and being social. So
We have only children. Both of us have only children. So
yeah,
they can be
um,
great too.
Well, I
yeah,
a whole article about how there's so many children that those old sort of folks
Yeah.
don't
yeah,
necessarily fit, right? So
yeah,
they're
yes, I
including
appreciate
more.
it. But it's like, it was funny because I can remember like it was so much, my story was just so much of who I was. And when you're little, like that's really all you know. And I didn't understand like that I was different till probably like the first grade. And I remember a friend of mine was saying that they were going to go to the hospital to pick up her baby brother. And I thought, oh my gosh, what's wrong with him? That's really sad. And she's like, no, that's where babies come from. They come from the hospital. I'm like, oh no, babies come from lawyers. That was like, that's how I knew my process to be. And I just assumed that that was everybody else's. So that was kind of, and as I got older, then I'm like, oh, now I get, how those things work together. Um, but yeah,
Now,
so it
were
just,
you close to your parents?
oh yeah, I still live. Yeah, caretaker for my mom right now. My dad was diagnosed with a rare terminal illness, and he passed in 2020 two and or 2023, and so I've been home since then to help take care of everything. So yeah, we were always close, always traveling, doing a lot of things together. And I think it helped that I've just always known, but because like I said, like I fit
Yeah.
and all of my other family, they knew and nobody thought it was a big deal or anything like that. So that's really helpful. And I think that my parents were always very open and they said at any time, like, if you want to find out about your birth parents. We're totally, behind you. And I think like when I was 16, like, 16, you have that angst, like, I don't know. And I think I thought about it for like half a second. And then part of me was like, I don't know what's out there. And I know this. So like, why would I mess up? Like like where I am, I know I'm loved. I know I'm cared for. Um, and so like, I think I'm good. I remember when I was really little, I had like my hair was like that tow-heady blonde, like so blonde you really didn't look like I had hair. Um, and my youngest aunt and uncle, they would look through like the gossip magazines and they would try to figure out like who famous had given up a kid, like whose kid could I be? And I was like, dude, I don't think I'm famous. But it was just really kind of, because when you don't know, the possibilities really seem endless
Yes. Right.
as to
You
what
make.
that
Yeah,
could
that's
be.
called the ghost kingdom.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm curious, so when you heard us on NPR on Gen Y,
Hmm.
was there like aha moments of like, oh, because you had a good adoption, which is great. We would hope that happens, but were there
Yeah.
like things that were like, oh, connect the dots stuff?
Yeah, I think part of it was that I found it intriguing because I would say like 95% of my adoption has been overwhelmingly positive. I've only had like maybe a couple negative interactions like in high school where people were kind of like would use it kind of against me.
Mhm.
But for the most part, it was really, really positive. So there were a couple people from the interview that I was listening to, and they were talking about how there was more of like a trauma that had come with
Mhm.
their adoption. And so I think for me, like I don't know if I could classify it as a trauma. I don't think it was that hard. Like there was that time when I was probably like in my late 20s, early 30s, and my friends were starting to have kids and seeing their reaction, then it was kind of like it made it a little bit more of a puzzlement at first as to how someone could have a child and then release a child.
Well,
Um,
and let's clear it up though, because often when people talk about trauma, they're not talking about their
Right.
adoptive family. They're talking about the trauma of being relinquished, and that is a
right.
diagnosable complex PTSD. And however
Yeah.
that shows up in your life or doesn't show up in your life, that's kind of what people are talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that that is like listening to it and following it through. I think that was the connection I came to. Was it at first when I heard it, I was thinking the one, and then as they talked about it, that's more like what it was like, oh, okay, I get it now, is like that process of dealing with of how do you let me go? Like what is that? And then if you let me go, how does that affect me and how do I deal with that? So
Mhm.
that relinquishing, I think that and as I would listen to people, I was like, oh, okay. And it made more sense. And I was like, and I think it was as they were listening, or as I was listening to it, it was kind of like a process that I had gone through earlier, and I just hadn't defined it with those terms. But it
Mhm.
was something similar that I had had to kind of like walk through.
Mhm. And did you feel any as you got older, or even in high school or whatever, were there like like did you ever have that kind of push away thing or just anything that you can kind of look back and say, oh, that's, you know, that
Makes sense now.
yeah,
Like
makes
I
sense
had
now.
abandonment issues, or I couldn't get close, or any
Yeah, I think
feeling
part of it was
feeling
just
different.
yeah, it was I've always had a lot of friends. But I would say it wasn't until I'd actually gone through the process of dealing with all those other things that I actually got close friends. So it's sort of like, you have that periphery of people that kind of know you,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't really share a lot of the other. Because typically when I would talk about being adopted, usually it was in a, it was more like jokey and things like that. And people were like, oh,
Right.
I wish I was adopted so I could deny my people. And it's like, I'm not really trying to deny my people, so it was just like, they would bring up things I was like, well, wait, what am I talking? So it's kind of all those little things that you don't even know that you have to deal with until like it's like there, like, oh, okay, we need to walk through this first.
And your parents were open about it. So
Yes.
that's actually rare. I mean, that's not the norm.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah,
did
that
you,
was and
yeah.
they didn't really know much from they had I think the other thing that kind of helped was that all the steps that went before me, the people that were there seemed to really understand like the process and where I would be, where my parents would be. So when I was born, um the once from like the day you were born, apparently you had 3 months. The birth mother has 3 months to decide whether to keep the child or relinquish the child. So during that time, I was put into foster care,
Mm-hmm.
which was good because my mom's biggest fear was like that someone would give her me and then take me back.
Mm-hmm.
So that was so being in foster care, that kept my mom knew I was kind of coming, but she didn't physically have me to, but the lady who took care of me in foster care, she was, I don't know her, but she actually kept a journal. And so she kept the journal from my perspective. Like,
Oh.
today I went to the doctor and I got my, so, because there's a lot of, I was adopted at like 2.5 months. So there's, between birth and 2.5 months, there's several like milestones that babies hit. And so she kept a journal from my perspective so that my mom, once I was adopted, would know this happened on this day, this happened on this day. But it's written like, and I have a copy. My mom has the original, and then I have a copy. And it's written really cute. It's like, today I went and saw my doctor. Oh, he's so handsome. Like, those kind of, so it was just so she could sit down and read it and kind of experience those moments with me, which I think was really helpful. And then it helped me because a lot of that bonding time is done during that time. And so I think it took me a little bit to actually like bond with people. And I think that that's why I had a lot of friends, but not close friends till later, because I had to
Yeah.
figure out how to actually make those connections.
I mean, there are some fairies that adoptees attach but don't bond, which
Oh,
makes sense
that would
to
make
me,
sense.
my
Yeah.
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
Did you ever do a search, or have you
Yeah. I was wondering.
tried?
I didn't the for me, my understanding growing up, and to my knowledge, I don't think things have changed, but with the closed adoption for the county, that you would go to the office and you could fill out a form and they would put the form on record. And then if the other party comes in and fills out a similar form, they would make those connections for you. Um, I haven't filled out a form. And
That's the
so,
same. It's still the same in LA County, but we do have DNA.
I was just going
right.
to say that. Like, yeah, have you? Because in our experience, I don't know if you've listened to our podcast or if you've read books or anything like that, but it's particularly the girls who went away
Yeah.
of that era in which you were born was a very punishing, secretive time. And
Yes. Yeah.
it's very possible your mother would love to hear from you.
Yeah. I
I,
had
Kim,
like I said, I had the kind of like an inkling of like maybe, maybe not. And then I think I've seen maybe one too many like 2020s or 48 hours where it's like, I'm just trying to get my, DNA and find out like this. And then all of a sudden, three or four families are ruined because they're like, how'd this kid show up? And so part of me
Kim,
is like,
can I say
yeah,
one
go
thing
ahead.
off of what Sarah said before you get too far? Is that when you were saying that your mother had 3 months, I know in California that was the supposed thing, but back in 1967, because we're also that era called the
Yeah.
baby scoop era, they didn't tell the mothers they had that right. So
Right.
very few mothers ever knew they had that right to come back. Most, I'd say, anecdote, from what we know, most
Yeah.
didn't know that. So
Yeah.
I even wonder um, if that, because there's a lot of, even though the thing, I'm happy you had the foster mother who documented because so few people have that, right?
Yeah.
And then your parents sound really great and open, but it's like so few people know that key of it, that the mother
Right.
really was not, they're very much like, bye. And no one tells them their rights. And
In California, particularly due to a woman
yes,
named Georgia Tan,
yeah,
who facilitated a lot of baby thefts and
Um,
adoptions to famous people in California. And they would not want, if like Clark Gable or whomever would probably be advocating to keep those laws private and
right.
not share that information with the first mothers. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Be surprised if your family didn't think of you or wonder where you are or how you are or
Oh yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
I've thought about that. Like I do like on those like, on my birthday, on my adoption day, on Mother's Day, send
yeah,
up like an extra little prayer because my the assumption has been and what the only thing really my parents were told was that my biologicals had similar heritage. So like my mom's family's pretty much English, my dad's family's pretty much, mainline German, you know. I'm pretty much Anglo-Saxon. I was really hoping to be like do a DNA and be like the world's shortest Viking or something. But I'm pretty sure I just like, English,
you
German.
could do that.
Yeah.
So are you keeping DNA on the table, or is it
It
something
is.
you're going to
It is.
consider?
I'm just sort of like
I'm, time is
yeah.
time is short.
Yeah. And if I did, and I've talked with my mom about it, because again, she's like, if you want to do it, I'm like, I'm good. But I think the one thing that I would like to do if I did any sort of DNA was not so much like to find people, but really just to kind of figure out like
Who you
where
are.
I am actually from, like
That's how it
that part.
starts. Everybody
That's how
says
it
that.
starts, exactly.
Yeah.
And then you start reading books and your mind kind of blows open and everything, at least for me, everything fell into place and made sense about why I was the way I was. And
Yeah.
as we progress scientifically, it's more and more discovered that we really are more nature than nurture. So I don't,
Yeah. Yeah, I
yeah.
had one of my friends, she was kind of like I described before, like she was adopted into a family with people like, they loved her, but the dark hair, dark eyes. She was taller than them, blonde hair, blue eyes. She loved being athletic, loved being outside, and her family was much more couch potato-y. And so when she actually like she just didn't feel like she fit. And so for her it was like a real pull to find her birth parents. And she said when she found her birth mom, like when they first met, it was like looking in a mirror. And
Yeah.
her mom liked the same exact things, and so it was like, okay, this clicks. And they were able to actually, form like a friendship over time. And that makes sense again because I think because she didn't feel like she fit um right now. And the other thing too I've heard before in several of the videos I listened to and podcasts was that individuals after they've had their own children seem
Yeah.
to be more again pulled to find
Mhm.
out answers. um as a person who's been single with no children,
Yeah.
that I just I'm like I'm really good, like I like my life very low complication is kind of how
Yeah. Which is kind of funny when even you talking about that, that's sort of an adoptee thing too, by the way, to kind of like keep your stuff in order because I mean it's interesting. I know you're taking care of your mom too, and that's a hard time, right? And your father just passed. I went through that. So I mean, you may after they pass or that may change for you too because you're sort of like, wait, now let me investigate this next level, right?
yeah.
And it is interesting. It like you said, you don't I know you said I don't want to blow up people's families and stuff, but for the most part, most people don't feel that way, right? That's
Oh,
it's a
I
people
think it's a small percentage
small
of,
percentage. And even
yeah.
if it
and
is, you kind of figure out still who you are. I mean, you already have that answer like no, right? You already
Right.
have no.
and 2020 and Frontline are looking for those types of stories.
Right.
Don't think that's the norm, at least in our experience. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
we have the right to know who we are and where we came from, despite an archaic law
Yeah.
that's in place in California. We have a right to information, to our health history, to
Hmm.
our DNA, to our story.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That was the one of the last podcasts I listened to when you just said your health report. Um I can remember as a kid, I was trying to get on the basketball team and I'd had a pretty bad knee injury. So I rehabbed, and when I went back to you have to get the doctor's okay and all that stuff. And I was at a new doctor, and the nurse came in and she was going like, "Okay, so you're doing like your family health history." And I remember like answering because again, like it never even dawned on me. Like I would just answer like, "Oh, my great grandma had this," but because those are the people I know. This is my family. And then she's like marking all this stuff and it's under my name. And I was like, and in the back of my, like 16-year-old head, I was thinking, I was like, how am I gonna play basketball if all this negative stuff is on my list? And then I looked at the lady, I'm like, um, I'm actually adopted. Does that change anything? And she got like almost angry and had to erase everything and then just write adopted at the top. I was like, oh, this comes with benefits. This is okay. So now I
But
don't have to fill out any of them. I'm just like, oh, this is so much better. And I remember
yeah,
someone else in your a podcast before had done like the same thing. Is like it's kind of like that little like you don't know, and that's kind of frustrating not to know. But
yeah.
on a kid's level, I was like, oh, this is much better than filling out this whole form. But
it
Yeah.
can be it
And
can be life or death for some people later, right?
Right.
yeah,
Know things and that and just not having the access
Carolyn
to
pops into my
care.
head,
Yes.
about
mm,
yeah, there's a lot.
yeah,
In American Baby, one of my favorite books ever, the story of, Margaret and
Yeah.
David trying, and his life would have been saved had the adoption agency shared information with.
mm,
So there's a lot
wow.
of really nefarious practices and deceit, and so.
Yeah. I think just randomly when you said like different books, like I think for like as a kid, I remember seeing like TV movies or different movies about like, like people looking for an adopted kid because they had a kid of their own that was now sick. So I remember
Oh,
in my
right.
teen years, I was like, is someone coming after me for my kidneys? Is someone coming after me for like, am I now just gonna be like some, or like, are my parents spies? Are they hiding somewhere? So like
Kim,
different
you
things.
need to stop watching TV if you're
I
going
know.
to.
But I think overall the movie that I saw that like probably traumatized and triggered like me more than anything was The Identical Strangers.
Yes.
Oh, Three Identical Strangers.
Yeah.
One of the greatest documentaries
Yep.
ever, I think.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
I was like verbally like yelling at this and I had to like
Right.
stop myself. I was like, because I was in the theater, I was like, oh, I need to like chill. But I was like, how does this happen?
Well, and that agency, the Louise Wise agency, was a
Hmm.
big agency in the East Coast during our time. These were those adoption agencies, right?
Yeah.
And they were,
Wasn't it Margaret's in
yes, it
in
was
American
American,
Baby? I
yeah,
mean,
it was
they were
Yeah.
terrible. So
terrible.
many. It still goes on. There's so many bad
Yeah.
things that still go on. But I would encourage you to, when you're ready, have your DNA, and we would love for you to follow up with us and let us
Oh,
know.
totally. Yeah. If that ever gets to that point, I will let you ladies, after my family, will be the first to know.
And also, if you ever have any need, if you start wanting to kind of have more of an adoptee community or anything, just reach out to us. We have so many things we can connect you with, or books if you're interested in reading.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a lot of resources. And I mean,
Yeah.
it could be that you start reading more and things start coming up. So just to know that you have a support system,
Yeah.
we're here for you.
Yeah, I totally appreciate that. And I found that I sent when I sent in my query to you to try to be on the podcast, I have found I wrote a YA novel about being adopted, and
Yeah.
I've actually heard from several adoptees how when they read it, like it really kind of helped them tell their story because it's technically a YA novel, but a lot of the adults who are reading it are finding that it's opening doors and giving them more words to kind of talk to people.
Yeah.
One lady, it's gone through like every member of her family. She said she's mailed it like to Texas, to New Hampshire, like everywhere. And that just really touches me because that's sort of like if my story, like I said, if my
Yeah.
story can help somebody else, that I think that that's really kind of cool. And
Kim,
one lady who
what's
reached
the
out,
name of your book? What's
Yeah,
the name
thank
of
you,
your book?
Louise. Would you
yeah,
have it? You can hold it up,
I somewhere I should.
or if you just tell
Oh,
us
here
the
it is.
name. Okay,
Yeah.
good.
So it's called I don't know if you can see it with the camera, but it's
To
called
whom
To
it
Whom
may
It May
concern.
Concern.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah, and so it follows Logan, who the night before he turns 13, learns from a family member that he doesn't even really like that he's adopted. And
Oh,
now he's convinced that his parents have other secrets and other things they haven't told him. So he runs away to find out the truth, and he meets a cast of characters along the way that teach him what is family, what is community, what is belonging, trying to be your authentic self. And so I wrote it because like I said, like I've known all my life, but several of my friends, they did find out sadly this way.
yeah.
And it really turned their world upside
Of
down.
Yeah.
course.
And so I tried to imagine what would that be like for me. And so, it's set in California. He's a surfer kid. He just loves the ocean.
Yeah.
And then he learns that his biologic is from like Kansas, and he's like, "What?" Like, you know, like I try to think of like what would be like the most opposite of California, you know? And so, but I've also had one of the reviews I got back was a lady who had actually just recently moved to the States, and she got it for her kids. And she was saying, as an immigrant, it really talked to her too about like identity
Oh,
and things like that. So um,
nice.
it's
Well,
been really cool just to get that feedback.
Yeah.
why don't you send us the link and we'll put it in the show notes so that people
Oh,
can get your
okay.
book. Yeah,
Oh, that'd be awesome.
of
Thank you.
course.
Course.
And
Yeah.
we would love a copy too. So
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'll get you some of your addresses, and I'll get you guys copies. That'd be
It's
awesome.
interesting, Kim, because
Wow.
I'm like 12 chapters into a YA novel, but it's sort of adult actually. And so I'm
Yeah.
interested to read yours. I'd like to see how that, because
Yeah. I
I'm
remember
a
as a kid, most of the books I read were like a levels higher,
little, yeah.
and I enjoyed those. You know, those were
Doesn't have to be so dumbed down sort of thing.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah,
well,
thank
thank you. I'm
you.
looking forward to reading
Yeah.
it. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us. We really
Oh,
appreciate
thank
your
you, ladies. It
time
was
and
great to be here with you.
yeah, really nice meeting you,
And
Kim.
reaching out after NPR, that's just cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah, I
that. We
know.
never
Let's keep our
know.
fingers crossed that NPR is able to kind of
Oh,
find its
Let's
way there,
let's please
yeah.
keep everything
Fingers
crossed.
crossed.
right?
Yeah.
Thanks, Kim.
Thanks, Kim.
Thank you.
Thank you.